Monitor maintenance. Do not work inside a monitor. It is dangerous. Again, these capacitors store enough energy to burn you, start a fire, blind you, and stop your heart. Properly ventilate the enclosure. You couldn't stick it inside of a sealed wooden case because they generate a lot of heat in the back, and it needs to come out. There's holes in there and it needs to come out. It needs to be ventilated. So you couldn't put it in an enclosed box and seal it in there. Clean the face of the CRT gently, just as if you would an LED monitor. Do not push the monitor beyond its operating guidelines, meaning the refresh rates. You could literally burn it out or burn your card. And then use the energy saving features. They weren't very good at energy saving at all. So troubleshooting, when you're having trouble, check the cables, including the power and display cables. Check the front panel controls on the monitor underneath. And then check the display drivers and reinstall them if needed. Try another display adapter. So if the adapter, this is what you do in order, right? So if you've done everything else and the drivers and everything seem to be working, pop that one out and try another one in its place. And then refer the problem to a specialist after that, like manufacturer, for example. So one thing they're not telling you is if you swap out the card and you plug that monitor in there, still doesn't work, then I would try another monitor. The monitor's probably bad. Comparing CRT and flat panel displays. So we're talking about LCDs, maybe not necessarily LEDs. So we have a light emitting diode and then a liquid crystal display. So an LCD and an LED. The LED is what you guys and ladies are used to today. The LCD was the predecessor. So in this case, we're going to be talking specifically about the flat panel display, the FPD, which is basically an LCD, a liquid crystal display. So there's costs, compatibility, ergonomics, size, and emissions. Lower radio frequency interference, all that energy that's being released from the magnetic properties of that beam steering going on in there. And greater RFI and radiation in the CRT, right? So the flat panel displays, the newer the technology, all this stuff kind of waned away. And the eye problems, the headaches, you used to literally get headaches from the older monitors. You don't get that on these. Also, I guess ergonomics would fall under weight. So the weight of these things was incredible in the CRT. And then the FPDs, and ever since, they're just so much lighter. FPDs, flat panel displays. So how flat panel displays work. Flat panel displays use a transparent organic polymer sandwiched between a polarizing filter with some form of backlighting. So we'll talk about what that means in a minute. An electrical charge determines if the light passes or not. And the LED displays have adjoining cells, each with different colors. Active matrix displays have largely placed passive matrix displays. So have largely replaced passive matrix displays, PMDs. So there's active matrix versus passive matrix, what they're getting at there. So the transparent organic polymer, what does that mean? So in that LCD, a liquid crystal display, you have a screen and it's sandwiched between two polymer materials. And then these polymer materials would become excited and they're all specifically chopped out into squares called pixels, right? They're perfect squares. So when you try to zoom in on something very small, because it was square, it still never looked 100%. Everything, when you zoomed in there, would still look very blocky. Something like you would see in paint if you zoomed in really close to the pixels. They're little squares. That's what your LCD looks like. The LEDs are much better about that, especially the high definition ones. There is no square image anymore in there, no matter how much you zoom in. So that flat transparent organic display, it would have lights. It was backlit. So the light is basically behind. So if this is the screen, let me turn it sideways. So now this is the screen. And now here's the light back here. The light would just come on and it would light up the whole thing. And wherever the electrical charge would appear, it would open this cell. And then the light could shine through, and that's what you saw. So basically the whole thing is blacked out by an electrical charge. And then as it wants it on, and depending on the color and the characteristics, it would shut off parts of the display, which produced an image. So part of the black image would go away and it produced an image. And then they also had the gray background. They had different backgrounds that it could do, different levels of black, basically. And then along comes the LED, and also these LCDs. Some of the later models, they had one light at the bottom, which was a really poor display. The better ones had it directly in the back. But they had it, some of them had them on all the sides too, but they had a light across the bottom, a round tube, and that would light up the whole back. So when the crystal would open, you could see what it was trying to show you, right? So then the light sometimes would break and it would cause a streak up the front of the monitor. Like it would cause a vertical streak. And the way you did that was you pulled it apart, and they had some like aluminum tape, for lack of a better term, is basically taped together. The polymers were taped together, and you would untape all the polymers and everything, and then pull it apart and take the bulb out and just change the bulb and put a new one in. They were about 14 bucks, and they would charge $1,000 to replace those displays. Oh, there was a time when you could make so much money just changing out those lights. It was incredibly simple to do. And then it was a lot of fun because you could take the busted lights and make all kinds of things with them, but you had to have all the little circuitry parts to light them up. So you take a couple of broken laptops and you could have a lot of fun with the displays. People used to use them before we had these LED strips to light up their cars and things like that. They were basically just fluorescent lights.